Well, one of the things I wanted to do during this off season was kind of circle back to my YouTube channel and start looking at some of the comments and some of the questions I got as I started posting videos since this last spring. And I also have some people that reach out directly to me through email and stuff like that. And one of the themes or questions that I get from time to time is, and sometimes it's from people that are looking at buying some land, maybe new land purchases, or they have a small property and they really want to know what they're getting themselves into. So the question is, how much land or how many acres do you need to be able to grow big bucks? Can you do it on 40 acres? Does it take 1,000 acres? These are kind of questions I get. And I really think that that's the wrong question to ask. So I'll circle back at the end and start talking, or I'll address the acres part of the question. But I think that's the wrong question to ask yourself is, how much land do you need or how many acres do you need? Certainly the more acres you have, the easier it's going to be to grow big bucks compared to small properties. But I think there's a better strategy or mindset to look at this in how to grow big bucks. I have some notes here that I just kind of want to go through. I don't want to forget anything because I thought about this a lot this fall when I was in tree stand or when I was hunting with Lily. I thought about this question a lot and how I could address it, so I didn't really want to miss anything, so I have some notes here. It's easier to grow big bucks on different properties the way they set up. So the first thing I'll talk about, and these are just some examples. So let's say you have an island farm or a peninsula farm. So you have a 40 or 80 or 100 acre piece that's a peninsula. So maybe you have a road on two sides, a giant cow pasture on the other side. So it's kind of a peninsula where you don't have any hunting pressure besides yourself on three sides. Or an island, which is obviously you don't have any hunting pressure all the way around your farm. Maybe it's cow pasture or big CRP fields, roads, waterways, something that makes your property where neighbors that are not like-minded can't hunt your fence lines and can't put a lot of pressure on your fence lines. Those properties are inherently easier to manage or to keep bucks on your property and to grow them to the next age class, no matter what that age class is. The second thing I always talk about is what kind of gun season does your area or your state have? Do you have a high-powered rifle season compared to a shotgun only? Is your gun season, your primary gun season, in the middle of the rut? Or is it later? Is it after the primary of the rut? How long is that primary gun season? When the gun season is located in your area or your state and what weapon you can use is out of your control, but that makes a big difference as to how easily or how easy is it to grow bucks to their next age class. If you're in a state with a high-powered rifle and that high-powered rifle season is in the middle of the rut, it's going to be a lot harder to protect bucks because they're out looking for hot does and they're going to be a lot more active as opposed to if your state is, let's say, a shotgun only, or even in your area of your state is a shotgun only, and the season, let's say, is out of prime rut. It's going to be a lot harder for hunters to take those bucks if they have a weapon that's not good out to 300 yards, let's say. Another thing you can look at is in every state, there are pockets of what I would call, management, quality deer management. Are you in one of those pockets where you have some like-minded landowners? Maybe there's a couple bigger landowners that own 300 or 400 acres that are passing up smaller bucks. Or are you in an area of the state or your county where all the surrounding landowners are brown is down and it's just pretty much everything that moves is getting shot? That has a huge impact on, can I grow big bucks on a 40 or an 80? If you're in a brown is down area, it's going to be much more difficult than if you're in an area where there's some maybe larger landowners or there's some more like-minded landowners. So there's a bunch of scenarios. You can't just answer, how many acres, how much land do I need to grow big bucks, because there's the terrain features of your property, island or peninsula. There's, what kind of rifle season or shotgun season you have, when is the timing of that season during the rut, and what are your neighbors like? Are you in a pocket of management or are you not in a pocket of management? It doesn't have to be super high management, but just a couple like-minded landowners in an area that are willing to pass up some bucks. So as I said earlier, I think that's the wrong question to ask yourself, is how many acres I need or how much land do I need. That's really the wrong question. The question really should be, what things do I need to do? What tactics do I have to have so that I have the greatest chance, the greatest potential to grow bucks to the next age class on my property? That's really the question. And then once you do everything you can possibly do to give yourself the greatest potential to grow big bucks on your property, then you give yourself 3 or 4 years of that strategy and you'll know if you can grow big bucks or not, or at least grow bucks to the next age class. What happens a lot, I see this time and time again, is hunters will have, not ideal conditions, but they won't do what's necessary. They won't take the necessary steps or the tactics required to grow big bucks, and they'll just throw their hands up and they'll say, I can't do it because it'll never work here, it'll never work in my state, it'll never work in my neighborhood because such and such neighbor shoots everything, such and such neighbor drives a four-wheeler around and they're bumping deer all the time, but they haven't done everything that they can possibly do to attract and keep deer on their property so they can protect them. And this is not complicated stuff. So I broke this down. I have an earlier video on YouTube, but I broke this down into the 4 strategies, really the 4 keys to growing big bucks. And the first is you have to provide them, this is to have the greatest potential to grow big bucks. The first is you have to have the best habitat that you could possibly have. And I'm talking about native habitat. I'm not talking about food plots. That's a separate subject. So the best native habitat you could possibly provide the deer herd. And what do I mean by that? Thick cover. And thick cover is all about, woody regen, your brushy species like red dogwood, elderberry, American cranberry, willows, hazelnut. It's your thickets. It's your thick woody browse and hardwood regen. I mean, when you sit down on your butt, you shouldn't be able to see farther than like 20 yards, 30 yards. If you're seeing farther than that, it's not thick enough. And then you get into all the details about how to terminate trees. Should I hinge cut trees? Should I girdle trees? Should I do hack and squirt? And those are all the details that, we can talk about that stuff. But at the end of the day, is your property thick or is your property not thick? And to grow big bucks and to hold them on your property, it has to be thick. Then we talk about best habitat. It's got to be diverse. You can't have a 40-acre monoculture of aspen regen, for example. You can have that, but that's not the best. The best is the most diverse habitat you can have. And that's why I list like those woody browse species. So you want woody browse, hardwood regen. Maybe you want, if you're in an area of the country, especially the northern half of the country where you get cold and snow, you want some thermal protection. So I like to mix in some pines or spruces or cedars in pockets to make your habitat diverse. And that gives you some thermal cover. So a diverse landscape that's thick and has thermal cover. That's your habitat. The second thing is you want to have food plots that support that habitat and peak during the hunting season. So I'm not saying you can't plant summer food plots. I'm not even saying you shouldn't plant summer food plots. But you need to have food plots that peak in attractiveness during the hunting season. And I'll go one step further. If the majority of the young bucks on your property are getting shot during the gun season, then you want your habitat and your food plots to peak in attractiveness during that gun season, during that rifle season, for example. So I always talk about greens and grains. I don't plant just greens and I don't plant just grains. There's some guys out there that will tout or tell you you only need to plant greens. If you supply greens as your base for your food plot, that's really the key. That's what's going to get you. But I have found over the years, when you're hunting the upper Midwest and you have, let's say, a gun season, and I always go back to Wisconsin because that's what I'm familiar with because I hunted there for 30 years. You really want to have a grain food plot that's available to the deer in your area that peaks during that mid to late November if there's a gun season in there. Some years, that standing corn or maybe soybean food plot is not that attractive during that time period if it's warm out because the deer will still seek a green food plot. That's why I provide greens for them. But if you get cold and you start getting 2, 3, 4 inches of snow on the ground and your neighbor's got a 3-acre standing cornfield or 3 acres of beans and you don't, they're going to have the lion's share of deer. So I always talk about phenomenal habitat that peaks during the hunting season, food plots that supplement that habitat that also peak during the hunting season in the form of greens and grains. The third thing is really it's a freebie. It doesn't cost you a dime, and that's hunting pressure. If you have low hunting pressure on your property, very, very low pressure, so I mean in the extreme, you never walk on your property, which is impossible because you have to do habitat work and you have to do some hunting. But if there's very minimal human pressure on your property all year long compared to the groups that are driving deer and walking in and out of their stands in the middle of their timber, kind of the two extremes, if you have low hunting pressure where the deer aren't being disturbed hardly at all, especially during the gun deer season in your area, that will give you your best chance of keeping bucks on your property so that you can protect them. So when we talk about the best habitat, there's one more yet, but before we get to number 4, when we talk about the best habitat, the best supplemental food plots that you can, and low hunting pressure throughout the season, deer will select properties that have the best habitat, the best food, and the lowest pressure. So even if you only have an 80, and we know bucks have home ranges that are bigger than 80 acres, so you're never going to keep a buck on a 40-acre piece or an 80-acre piece or a 120-acre piece. They're going to go off of your property. But because deer are selective, they get to choose where they want to be, they will select properties with the least amount of hunting pressure, the best food, and the best habitat. So if you can give them that, that gives you your best chance to grow bucks to the next age class because they will select your property more times, more often. They will spend more time on your property than your neighbors, and that will give you your best chance of protecting them. The last, number 4, it's kind of a complicated subject, so I'm really not going to get into it, but it's really about creating space on your property for bucks. If your property is just loaded with does, it's nothing but doe family groups, and you refuse to shoot any does, and your neighbors are harvesting does. In other words, they are creating space on their property for bucks. 2 things could happen. First is, on your property, you're going to disperse all the buck fawns. So all the buck fawns are going to leave your property because you're refusing to shoot some does. The second thing is, when buck fawns from all the surrounding areas, 3, 4, 5 miles away, are dispersing those buck fawns in the spring or the fall of their first year, they're not going to come to your property if your property is loaded up with doe family groups. They're going to likely set up shop or set their home range up in an area that's less dense with population. That's a whole other subject we can get into, but that's really the 4 keys. The best habitat, the best food, the lowest hunting pressure, and make sure you have at least some amount of space for bucks to call your area home. If you do those 4 things, that gives you your best chance of attracting and protecting and growing bucks on your property, growing big bucks on your property. I know people are still always looking for acreages. So I'll say this about acreages, and this is just based on my experiences. If you have 20 or 30 or 40 acres and you're trying to create phenomenal deer habitat to keep deer on your property so you can grow, these giant bucks, it's going to be very difficult. There's just no way around it. It's going to be very difficult, especially if your neighbors are just hammering everything. Again, there's things you can do to give yourself the best chance you possibly can, but there's no way you're ever going to reach this level like what you see with YouTube stars or like the hunting channels or professional deer hunters. It's just not going to happen on a small property unless you're in an area where there's other, a bunch of other like-minded hunters.
Don't be discouraged if you only have a small property. Most hunters do. I have yet to see a property that can't be made better through implementing the 4 keys talked about in this video.
Once you start getting into the 200s, 250 acres plus, I just have not seen a scenario that, in my opinion, I couldn't take that property. Now, I'm talking about deer habitat. I'm not talking about a 300-acre property where 290 of it is row crop, and you have like a little 10-acre ditch. I'm talking about diverse habitat. Maybe it's mixed agriculture, but you start getting above 200 acres, and I just have not seen a property. I don't care where it is. I don't care if it's high hunting pressure or not. I don't care when the rifle season is, where, in my opinion, I can't take that property, or I can't look at that property and say, I can create phenomenal habitat, phenomenal woody browse, supplement with food plots, keep hunting pressure to a low, shoot some does, and I'm not going to be able to grow big bucks. No, I will. I will be able to grow big bucks. And that's almost a guarantee no matter where you are. So to just go back and sum this up, I think the wrong question to ask yourself is, how much land or how many acres do I need? Or if I can buy the neighbor's land, will that guarantee me that I can grow big bucks? The question you should be asking yourself, or the thought process, that you should be having is, what tactics can I implement? What strategies can I implement to give me the greatest chance to grow big bucks? And it's the 4 tactics, it's the 4 strategies I just gave you will give you your best chance to grow big bucks.